Good evening, all. For this discussion, I chose James Byrd's Sacred Scripture, Sacred War, the Bible and the American Revolution, Chapter 2, The Lord is a Man of War, Moses, the Exodus, and the Spirit of 76. One of the big things that James Byrd tried to, in this chapter, was to correlate the colonists to the Israelites, whereas Moses spoke to God through Exodus. It was in the King James Version, Exodus 15:3, the Lord is a man of war, or in the New International Version, the Lord is a warrior. This is how the colonists felt that they paralleled those of the Israelites as they were trying to escape Egyptian rule. Moses was spoken to by God. He created or wrote 3 songs. One of them happened to be Exodus, which is the second book in the Old Testament. And the Old Testament, certain books did support certain ideology. However, a lot of the New Testament contradicted a lot of what the Old Testament spoke about. So religious leaders were using the Old Testament to support and defend themselves through sermons and theological practices to support political ideology and breaking away from England or British rule. Some of the founding fathers, in particular Ben Franklin, who was a philosopher, he had many friends who were that of the philosophical or clergy. At the same time, through another class, the colonies were going through kind of a theological realignment from a Calvinistic evangelical approach to theology to an Anglican Episcopal theology. And there was a lot of restructuring of religious boundaries during this time. So there was a lot of sermons. There was a lot of clergy trying to support the efforts in breaking away from British rule. And how they did that was they compared the colonists to the Egyptians. They also tried to correlate Moses parting the Red Sea, and then God flooded it and killed the Egyptian Pharaoh and his Egyptian soldiers. A similar event happened when a hurricane and other storms off the New England coast sank and killed over 4,000 British soldiers. They felt that this was a divine intervention by God, and that's what happened with that. However, a lot of the conflictions were the Bible, the Old Testament did talk about slavery, and when the founding fathers created the Declaration of Independence based on the Bible and whatnot, it contradicted their beliefs and practices as it was, because they felt that even though they wanted to get away from British rule, it was okay for them to still maintain the African slaves and keep them enslaved, which did contradict both the Declaration of Independence and the Bible. However, they felt that didn't pertain to them at that time. They did compare George Washington as being the father of our country, as Moses being the father of his people. However, when you look at the Old Testament and New Testament, the Old Testament, it was okay to wage war, to rebel against slavery and all of that stuff. However, Peter and Paul contradict that by saying that Christians need to condemn the rebellion and they need to submit to a ruler as it's part of their Christian duty. However, that's not what happened. So there was a lot of political ideology mixed in with theology, and it was just they were trying to find scripture to support their means of defending themselves and breaking away from Britain. Thank you.